The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 3 standard days without a break. Representatives from over 2,000 species filled the massive amphitheater on Centauri Prime, their varied forms creating a symphony of colors, shapes, and sounds that would have amazed any first-time observer. But today there was no wonder in the air. Only fear. Admiral Zextara of the Vorthan Empire stood at the central podium, her 4 arms gesturing frantically as she displayed the latest intelligence reports on the holographic projectors surrounding her. The data was grim. The Void Scourge, an ancient enemy that had emerged from the dark space between galaxies, had already consumed 47 star systems in just 2 months. Entire civilizations had been reduced to nothing more than empty space and floating debris. "The pattern is consistent," Zextara announced, her voice carrying the weight of impending doom. "They arrive without warning, deploy their world-eating constructs, and strip everything of energy and matter. Our combined fleets cannot even slow them down. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can modify them." A low rumble of distress echoed through the chamber. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being of pure living mineral, chimed in with a sound like breaking glass. "Our computational models show complete galactic consumption within 18 months at their current rate of expansion. No known technology can stop them." "What about the Eternal Archives?" asked Ambassador Kretok, the insectoid leader of the Hive Confederation. "Surely the ancient repositories contain something that can help us?" Zexthara's expression grew even darker. "We've accessed every archive, every ancient database, every forgotten library in the galaxy. The Void Scourge appeared once before, approximately 1 million years ago. They consumed 90% of all life in the galaxy before mysteriously withdrawing back to dark space. What stopped them before?" The question came from an unlikely source, a small bipedal creature sitting in one of the smallest delegation areas. The being looked remarkably ordinary compared to the exotic forms surrounding it. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with forward-facing eyes, and skin that seemed almost pale and fragile. Many of the larger delegates hadn't even noticed the human delegation before. Earth was a recently discovered world, barely qualifying for observer status in the Galactic Council. Their technology was primitive, their military insignificant, and their contribution to galactic civilization minimal. Most species considered them little more than curious children playing at being spacefaring. Zexthara checked her notes before responding. "Unknown." The archives from that period are fragmentary. The previous galactic civilization was almost completely destroyed. What little survived suggests that something about the Scourge's behavior changed suddenly, causing them to retreat. The human delegate, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, stood up slowly. At barely 1.7 meters tall, she had to use the communication amplifiers just to be heard over the massive assembly. "May I see the archive data about the previous incursion?" A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through some of the delegates. The Vorthan Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for polite dismissal among her species. "Dr. Chun, I appreciate your species' enthusiasm, but these archives have been analyzed by the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. The Catheran supercomputers have processing power that exceeds your entire planet's electrical output. If they cannot decode the mystery, I doubt—" "With respect, Admiral," Sarah interrupted, a breach of protocol that sent shocked whispers through the assembly. "Different perspectives can reveal different patterns. On my world, we have a saying, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees." The massive head of the Catheran delegate, a cybernetic fusion of biological and artificial intelligence, swiveled toward the human section. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonic blend of electronic tones and organic sounds. "The human demonstrates either remarkable courage or remarkable ignorance. Very well, we shall share the data. Perhaps fresh eyes will see what enhanced minds have missed." The archives began displaying around Sarah 3-dimensional representations of the galaxy from 1 million years ago. She watched as red markers appeared, showing the progression of the Void Scourge's previous invasion. The pattern was indeed systematic and devastating. Star system after star system fell in perfect concentric circles. expanding outward from multiple breach points in dark space. As she studied the data, Sarah became aware that the entire assembly had fallen silent. Thousands of beings, many with intellects that dwarfed her own, watched as this primitive newcomer attempted to solve a puzzle that had stumped galactic civilization for millennia. The archive showed the Scourge's advance, accelerating over the course of 30 standard years. Their technology seemed to grow more efficient with each victory, learning from the resistance they encountered. Energy weapons became useless against them within months. Kinetic weapons lasted slightly longer. Even exotic technologies like dimensional manipulation and quantum disruption were eventually adapted to and countered. Then suddenly the advance stopped. For no apparent reason, the Void Scourge halted their consumption of the galaxy and withdrew to dark space, leaving behind vast empty regions where billions of civilizations once thrived. The data shows complete withdrawal within a single standard year after 30 years of advance, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the amplification system. That's not gradual. Something specific caused this. Indeed, the Catheran replied. But what? We have found no evidence of a successful weapon, no trace of a counterattack, no indication of internal conflict within their forces. Sarah continued studying the patterns, her human brain processing the information differently than the advanced artificial intelligences that had examined it before. While the Catheran supercomputers analyzed every individual data point with perfect precision, her mind was looking for something else entirely. May I see the population distribution data from the pre-invasion period? She asked. New displays materialized, showing the bustling galactic civilization of 1 million years ago. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, all connected in a vast network of trade, communication, and cultural exchange. It was remarkably similar to the current galactic community, though the specific species were different. Sarah spent hours examining the data, while the assembly waited with growing impatience. Some delegates began to leave, convinced that this was a waste of time. Others remained, curious to see what the primitive human thought she could accomplish. Finally, Sarah straightened up, her eyes bright with discovery. I think I know what happened. The assembly fell silent again, thousands of beings focusing their attention on the small human figure. You're all looking at this as a military problem, Sarah continued. But what if it wasn't solved by force? What if the answer was something else entirely? Explain, Admiral Zexthara commanded. Sarah gestured to the population maps. Look at the distribution of species during the previous invasion. Notice anything unusual? The Catheran supercomputers processed the data instantly. The distribution appears normal for a thriving galactic civilization. Multiple species inhabiting various worlds according to their environmental preferences and technological capabilities. Exactly, Sarah said with growing excitement. Multiple species, diverse, different approaches to everything, technology, philosophy, biology, culture. But look at what the Scourge left behind. New displays showed the post-invasion galaxy. Vast empty regions where the Scourge had fed, but also scattered pockets of survivors. The pattern seemed random at first glance. The survivors don't match any logical strategic pattern, Sarah continued. They're not the most advanced species, or the most militarily powerful, or the most well-defended. In fact, they seem almost randomly distributed. But they do have one thing in common. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. They were all recent discoveries. New species that had just achieved spaceflight within the few centuries before the invasion. The galactic community barely knew they existed. A murmur of confusion rippled through the assembly. The crystalline collective's representative chimed questioningly, "How is this relevant to stopping an unstoppable force?" Because, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger, the Void Scourge isn't just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming information, knowledge, experience. They're learning from everything they destroy, becoming more efficient, more advanced, more unstoppable with every victory. The implications of her words began to sink in throughout the assembly. The Catheran delegate's cybernetic processes whirred audibly as it considered this new perspective. But the newcomer species had no significant knowledge to offer, it said. Their technology was primitive, their understanding limited. Why would their survival matter? Sarah smiled, the expression strange and fascinating to many of the alien observers. Because they were unknown variables. The Scourge can adapt to anything it encounters and analyzes, but it can't adapt to something it doesn't know exists. The assembly erupted in discussion. Representatives turned to each other, debating the implications of this theory in dozens of languages and communication methods. Admiral Zexthara raised her forearms for silence. Even if your theory is correct, Dr. Chun, how does this help us? We have N. The Galactic Council's fastest scout ship, the Quantum Echo, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system just as the last defense platforms went silent. Sarah Chun stood on the bridge, her hands pressed against the viewing ports as she watched something that defied every law of physics. She thought she understood. The Void Scourge constructs move through space like living shadows, their forms shifting and flowing in ways that made her eyes water to observe directly. They weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were vast, organic mechanical hybrid entities that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. As she watched, one of the smaller constructs, roughly the size of a small moon, simply passed through a planetary defense station. The station didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, its matter and energy absorbed into the construct's impossible geometry. Sensor readings are completely inconsistent, reported Zakmor, the ship's Altarian navigator. His crystalline head flickered with confused patterns of light. The constructs register as both there and not there simultaneously. Our instruments cannot maintain coherent scans. Captain Veltar, a veteran Vorthan officer who had reluctantly agreed to this mission, gestured with her secondary arms toward the tactical displays. This is why no ship returns from encounters with them. They exist beyond our understanding of reality. We should withdraw before they detect us. Not yet, Sarah said, her voice calm despite the terror of what she was witnessing. I need to see how they operate. Can you get us closer without entering their detection range? The captain's mandibles clicked nervously. Dr. Chun, there is no known detection range. Some of our fastest scouts have been consumed from distances of several light years. Others have approached much closer without being noticed. Their behavior follows no pattern our strategists can predict. Then we'll have to trust that today we're lucky, Sarah replied, still studying the constructs through the viewport. Move us to the inner system. I want to see them feed. The Quantum Echo crept forward through the system, its stealth systems engaged and all non-essential systems powered down. The crew of 12 beings from 6 different species worked in near-complete silence, knowing that their survival depended on remaining unnoticed by the impossible entities. Ahead of them, as they drew closer to the system's 4th planet, Sarah began to understand the true horror of the Void Scourge. The planet wasn't being destroyed in any conventional sense. Instead, the massive construct that had enveloped it was systematically unmaking it, pulling apart its fundamental structure layer by layer. Mountains flowed upward like liquid. Oceans drained into spiraling vortexes that led nowhere. The planet's core was being extracted while the surface remained temporarily intact, creating a hollow shell that glowed with unnatural energies. It's not random destruction, Sarah murmured, her scientific mind working despite the cosmic horror before her. They're conducting analysis, testing, learning. Commander Yextal, the ship's tactical officer, turned 3 of his 4 eye stalks toward her. Learning what? Everything, Sarah replied. Watch the patterns. They're not just consuming matter and energy. They're cataloging it, understanding it. Every mineral composition, every molecular structure, every energy pattern, they're building a complete database of everything that exists. As if responding to her words, one of the smaller constructs suddenly shifted its attention toward their location. Sarah felt her heart stop as something that might have been sensors swept over their ship. The feeling was indescribable, like being examined by a vast, Alien intelligence that existed on scales beyond human comprehension. "They've detected us," Captain Veltar whispered, her voice barely audible. "Engines to full power." "Prepare to—" "Wait," Sarah said urgently. "Don't move. Don't do anything. Are you insane?" The captain hissed. "If we don't run now—" "Look at it," Sarah insisted, pointing toward the construct that had noticed them. "It's not attacking. It's curious." The construct had indeed paused in its systematic dismantling of the planet. A portion of its impossible form seemed to be studying their small ship, but without the aggressive intent they had expected. After several tense moments, it simply returned to its work, dismissing them as apparently unimportant. "Why didn't it destroy us?" Zakmar asked, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. Sarah felt a chill of understanding run down her spine. "Because we're not a threat. Our ship is so primitive, so insignificant, that we don't even register as worth cataloging. We're like insects to them." The words stung her human pride, but she recognized the tactical advantage this revealed. Throughout galactic history, the most advanced civilizations had always been the first targets. The Void Scourge prioritized threats and valuable resources, but a small, primitive ship from an unknown species? It wasn't worth their attention. "Captain," she said slowly, "I need you to do something that's going to sound absolutely crazy." Valtara's compound eyes fixed on her. "I am already regretting this mission, Dr. Chun. Please do not make it worse. Take us closer to the feeding construct. I want to get a direct scan of its operation." The bridge erupted in protests from the mixed crew, but Sarah raised her hand for silence. "Listen to me. They've ignored us because we're beneath their notice. That gives us an opportunity no advanced fleet has ever had. We can observe them up close." "To what end?" demanded Yextal. "Even if we learn how they operate, we cannot fight them. Our weapons are useless against their technology." "Maybe fighting them isn't the answer," Sarah replied. "Maybe we need to think like humans instead of like galactic military strategists." Against every instinct and protocol, Captain Veltar ordered the ship forward. The quantum echo crept closer to the massive construct feeding on the planet below. At this range, they could see details that no other observers had ever witnessed, and survived to report the construct's feeding process was even more complex than they had imagined. Tendrils of energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously were not just consuming matter, but analyzing and categorizing it. Every atom was being broken down, studied, and filed away in some vast database. "It's like a cosmic library," Sarah breathed, watching the process through the enhanced sensors. "They're not destroyers. They're collectors, archivists. They're preserving everything they consume in some kind of informational matrix. But why?" Zakmar asked. "What is the purpose of such collection?" Sarah studied the patterns for nearly an hour, her mind working on the problem from angles that her alien colleagues couldn't comprehend. Where they saw random destruction, she began to perceive a deeper pattern. Where they saw malevolent force, she started to see something else entirely. "They're preparing for something," she said finally. "All this collection, all this analysis, it's preparation for some kind of massive project. But what would require the knowledge and resources of an entire galaxy?" As if in response to her question, the construct suddenly stopped feeding. The planet below, now a hollow shell glowing with strange energies, began to reshape itself. The matter that had been consumed wasn't gone. It was being reconstructed into something new, something that pulsed with purpose and intelligence. "By the eternal archives," Captain Veltar whispered. "They're not destroying civilizations. They're transforming them." The transformed planet began broadcasting signals and frequencies that their instruments could barely detect. The signals weren't random, they were complex, mathematical, purposeful, and they were being answered. Similar signals were coming from other systems throughout the galaxy, places where the Void Scourge had already completed their work. "It's a network," Sarah realized, her excitement overriding her fear. "Every system they transform becomes a node in some kind of galactic communication grid." "But communication with what?" Her question was answered moments later as space itself began to tear open near the system's edge. Through the rift came something that made the Void Scourge constructs look small and simple by comparison. It was vast beyond measurement, ancient beyond comprehension, and it moved through dimensions that human minds couldn't properly perceive. "The architects," Zakmar whispered, his crystalline form darkening with terror. "The ancient builders. They've returned." Sarah stared at the entity emerging from beyond normal space, her human brain struggling to process what she was seeing. But unlike her alien companions, she wasn't paralyzed by the cosmic scale of what they faced. Instead, her mind raced with questions and possibilities. "Scan everything," she ordered. "Every frequency, every energy signature, every quantum fluctuation. Record it all?" "Dr. Chun," Captain Veltar said urgently, "we need to leave immediately. If the architects are returning, then the galaxy itself is in danger beyond anything we imagined." "Not yet," Sarah insisted. "I'm starting to understand. The Void Scourge aren't invaders. They're servants. They're preparing the galaxy for the return of their masters. But why now? What changed?" The massive architect entity moved through the system with impossible grace, examining the work of its Void Scourge servants. Where it passed, space itself seemed to become more organized, more purposeful. The chaotic energies of the feeding process were refined into something approaching cosmic art. As Sarah watched, more rifts opened throughout the system. More architect entities emerged, each one examining. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had grown even more desperate in Sarah's absence. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as more systems fell to the Void Scourge, but now with a horrifying new development. The consumed worlds weren't staying dead. They were being transformed into something else, broadcasting signals that created an ever-expanding network of unknown purpose. When the quantum echo returned to Centauri Prime, Sarah Chun walked into a council chamber filled with despair. Advanced species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia sat in stunned silence, their greatest minds unable to comprehend what they faced. The crystalline collective's representative had dimmed to barely a flicker. The Catheran supercomputers had actually shut down several processing cores rather than continue calculating their impossible odds of survival. Admiral Zexthara looked up as Sarah approached the central podium, her compound eyes reflecting a weariness that spoke of sleepless days spent in futile planning. "Dr. Chun," she said, her voice barely audible, "I trust your reconnaissance mission provided some insight before we face the inevitable." "Actually," Sarah replied, her calm tone cutting through the atmosphere of defeat, "I think I know how to save the galaxy." A bitter laugh echoed from the hegemony sector, where the proud warrior race Corvani had gathered. "Save the galaxy?" General Lexmore's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Dr. Chun, we have just received confirmation that the entities you observed are the legendary architects, beings of such power that they shaped the fundamental laws of physics in this region of the universe. Against such forces, salvation is a meaningless concept." Sarah activated the central display, showing the recordings from their mission. The assembly watched in horrified fascination as the footage revealed the true scale of what they faced. Planets being harvested like fruit. Space itself being reshaped. The architects moving through dimensions with casual indifference to the civilizations they were erasing. "You're right," Sarah said as the displays showed the cosmic entities at work. "We can't fight them. We can't hide from them. We can't negotiate with them. By any conventional measure, we're completely doomed." The admission sent a wave of despair through the chamber. If the human, who had been their last hope for a fresh perspective, was also admitting defeat, then truly nothing remained. "But," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, "we're not thinking about this correctly. We're all approaching this as a military problem, or a technological problem, or a political problem. But it's none of those things." She gestured to the displays, now showing the network patterns created by the transformed worlds. "The architects aren't conquering us. They're not even really destroying us. They're using us. Our entire galaxy is being converted into components for something they're building. And that gives us an opportunity. Admiral Zextara leaned forward. What kind of opportunity? Think about it, Sarah said, beginning to pace across the podium in a very human gesture that fascinated her alien audience. They need our galaxy to work a certain way. They need the transformed worlds to maintain specific energy patterns, to communicate in precise frequencies, to contribute exact amounts of resources to their project. They've spent enormous effort creating a perfect system. She paused, looking out at the thousands of beings hanging on her every word. But what happens if the system stops being perfect? The Catheran delegates' processors hum to life. You are suggesting sabotage of their network? Impossible. The energy requirements to disrupt even a single node would exceed the output of our most powerful weapons by several orders of magnitude. I'm not talking about disrupting the nodes with force, Sarah replied. I'm talking about introducing variables they can't account for. Remember, the architects have been doing this for millions of years across countless galaxies. They've perfected their process. They know exactly what to expect from every type of civilization, every form of technology, every possible resistance. She activated a new display, showing the brief moment of mental contact she had experienced with the architect entity. When one of them examined me directly, I felt its thought processes. They categorize everything according to vast databases of previous experience. Every species they encounter fits into established patterns. Every technology follows predicted development paths. Every resistance matches previous examples. So? General Dexmore demanded. You have already established that we cannot match their experience or capabilities. Exactly, Sarah said with sudden excitement. We can't match them. We can't even comprehend them fully. But that's precisely what makes us dangerous to their plans. She turned to address the Earth delegation. Commander Martinez, tell them about the Brisbane incident. A stocky human in military uniform stood up slowly. The Brisbane incident occurred during our first contact protocols. 6 months ago, Dr. Chun's team was studying a supposedly simple alien artifact that our best scientists had determined was purely decorative. Chun decided to sing to it. A ripple of confusion passed through the alien delegates. Several species didn't even have concepts analogous to human music. The artifact turned out to be a communication device, Sarah explained. One that responded to tonal patterns rather than traditional signal modulation. By approaching it with what every logical analysis would have called completely inappropriate methodology, we activated a system that had been dormant for 3,000 years. Interesting, but irrelevant, the crystalline collective chimed. A single archaeological discovery hardly qualifies as a solution to cosmic annihilation. But that's exactly my point, Sarah insisted. Human approaches to problems are consistently illogical by galactic standards. We make intuitive leaps that bypass rational analysis. We try solutions that make no sense according to established scientific principles. We succeed through methods that more advanced species dismiss as primitive or impossible. She gestured to the displays showing the architect network. Their entire system depends on predictability. They've accounted for every logical response, every rational strategy, every technological solution that advanced civilizations might attempt. But they've never encountered a species that consistently succeeds through approaches that make no logical sense. Admiral Zexthara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You are proposing that human irrationality could somehow disrupt a cosmic engineering project. Not irrationality, Sarah corrected. Creativity. Lateral thinking. The ability to see patterns that pure logic misses and to attempt solutions that rationality would reject. She activated another display, showing the detailed scans they had taken of the planetary network. Look at this node, the one that was pulsing out of rhythm. My analysis shows it's not a malfunction. It's an adaptation. When the architects transformed that world, there was something there they didn't expect. Something that forced their system to modify its standard pattern. The Catheran delegate processed the data instantly. Confirmed. The variance is consistent with an unplanned adaptation. But our records show that world housed only a primitive civilization with no noteworthy characteristics. What kind of primitive civilization? Sarah asked. Pre-space flight, agricultural, primary intellectual achievements included basic mathematics, primitive astronomy, and… The Catherian paused as it accessed more detailed records. Extensive development of what they termed artistic expression. Art, Sarah said softly. They made art, and somehow that art was significant enough to force the architect system to adapt. She turned back to the assembly, her eyes bright with possibility. The architects are perfect engineers working on a cosmic scale. But engineers, even cosmic ones, think in terms of function and efficiency. They categorize inputs and predict outputs. They don't understand creation for its own sake. They don't comprehend beauty that serves no functional purpose. They can't process the concept of making something simply because it feels right to make it. You are suggesting, Admiral Zexthara said slowly, that artwork could somehow disrupt beings capable of reshaping reality itself? I'm suggesting that the human approach to existence, our tendency to create meaning where none logically exists, to find beauty in chaos, to make connections that bypass rational analysis, represents something the architects have never encountered before. Sarah activated the final display, showing a complex plan she had developed during the journey back to Centauri Prime. They need our galaxy to function as a perfect system. Every component must operate according to precise specifications. But what if we introduce components that don't follow specifications? What if we give them something their cosmic experience can't categorize? The plan was ambitious beyond anything the galaxy had ever attempted. Instead of fighting the Void Scourge or trying to hide from them, Sarah proposed something completely different. They would surrender. But not in the way the architects expected. Every world that still remains free will broadcast everything that makes their civilization unique, Sarah explained. Not their technology, not their military capabilities, not their strategic resources. Their stories, their music, their poetry, their dreams. Their completely impractical, illogical, beautiful expressions of what it means to be alive. The Void Scourge will consume these broadcasts along with everything else, General Vexmore pointed out. Exactly, Sarah.